Another Maine-based Attic Find Friday from a 19th century card. I'll tell you the story. Hey, it's Mike. Thanks for tuning back in. It is Friday, which means Attic Find Friday, the best day of the week. Before I get started, real quick, just got this back. TTM autograph from Jim Rice on a Diamond Kings card. I also got back the Ryan Sandberg, so I'm excited to add those two to my collection. Yesterday, I was on a special pinch hitting guest on Card Benches with Danny Black. John Newman was unable to make it unexpectedly, so at the last minute, I jumped in. That was a lot of fun. Go check that out on Sports Vault channel or Sports Card Nation. Also, speaking of Sports Card Nation, I was a special guest on John's podcast, which is out today. He asked me all about collecting and my channel and stuff like that. It's only available on podcast format right now, but I think in 2 weeks it comes available on video. So Sports Card Nation, interview with me, if you're not already sick of me, which you probably are. Next week, I am interviewing Joe Posnanski about his new book and baseball cards. So I'm very excited about that. I've been working with his publicist for about a week now, trying to figure out a date, and we have landed on Friday afternoon next week interview. So I think I'm going to have to cancel Attic Find Friday next week and release that interview Friday evening or late afternoon. So we'll see. Today's story comes to us from Forbes, interestingly. I'm always interested in Forbes writing these up and not like the Portland Press Herald out of Maine, considering this was a Maine find. And I looked and I looked and I looked, trying to find a local article about this. Again, nothing, which is disappointing to me. But this was 2017. A man named John who lives in southern Maine near the border of New Hampshire. His parents were cleaning out their home, preparing for a move in the next year or so, when they were just giving John and his sister all kinds of old family heirlooms, saying, hey, you figure out what to do with these. And John and his sister had to decide what to keep and what to throw away. And one of these items was an old photo album from the 19th century, late 1800s. And in that album were stored 15 Old Judge cabinet baseball cards. And normally, when you find cards like this from that time, well, maybe not normally, but oftentimes they are pasted into an album or a scrapbook. These ones were in a custom album inserted into paper frames in the album. So they were in remarkably good shape. And 5 of the 15 that were found were graded to be the best ever of those cards. So pretty awesome find. And it's still surprising to me that these cards are being found in Maine, where there's very, very little hobby activity. There's no professional sports teams except for baseball the last, I don't know, however many decades, certainly not in the 19th century. There's also hockey, but not for very long. So yeah, it just surprises me a little bit that these 19th century cards are being found in Maine. These cards were passed down in their family for over 130 years. The album was, I should say. They were originally owned by John's great-grandfather, who had been a collector at the time in the late 19th century. So John thought these cards might be worth $100 each, but he decided to consult with Robert Edwards Auctions, REA, to see, and they said they might fetch over $100,000. So naturally, John decided to sell. So these are 1887-88 Old Judge cigarettes cards. They are classified by Jefferson Burdick as N173, N standing for 19th century. They were tobacco cards. They were, in the Old Judge cigarettes, there were coupons, and you could redeem 25 of these coupons for cards. And they were mail-in, and they would send you the premium back to you. And it's not known how many are on the checklist. At last count, there were almost 400, but it's growing all the time when more cards get found, because there are so many different variations, different stances that the players might have been taking, different colors. It's really quite interesting. And when you look at how many of these cards have been graded, it is remarkably different than the N172 Old Judge. For instance, PSA has fewer than 100 of these, whereas they have over 5,000 of the N172 Old Judges that are more famous. SGC has graded 536 of these cards, the cabinet cards, which are bigger. They're much bigger than the standard Old Judge. Over 500, so 600 or 700 combined between PSA and SGC. SGC has graded 12,000 of the N172s. So pretty huge difference. And when you consider like the 52 Mantle has thousands graded, these ones are very, very scarce now. There's obviously far less demand for these than there is for a Mantle, but the demand is still there, and the prices these got are pretty impressive. So that checklist of almost 400 players, 400 cards I should say, obviously has multiple players, or players multiple times on the checklist, but that checklist is growing. We may never know every card that was on the checklist because the checklist was provided to collectors at the time, and I don't think anyone has ever appeared. Old Judge would say you could pick from these players, and then you would send in your coupons to get your cards. Some of those players may never have been redeemed. We're going to talk about one that maybe Old Judge never expected to be redeemed, but was, and was found in this collection. So these cabinet cards, the photos were taken in a Brooklyn studio with cloth backdrops, and in some cases they had baseballs hanging down from strings to give the appearance of batted balls that were about to be caught. And I've got a couple of examples here which I find humorous. It's just a much, much older time. So King Kelly, you're probably familiar with King Kelly to some extent. Some consider the Babe Ruth of his day. Not because he hit home runs. He never led the league in home runs as far as I know, but he was the most popular player. He was called the King of Baseball pretty early in his career. I think he batted .394 or .395 one season. He led the league in batting a couple times. He was a great player of the 1880s. And he played, I think, about 15 or 16 years, and then he died right after his career ended. So one of the cards found in this is the King Kelly. It graded a 3 by SGC. One of the reasons that King Kelly is so famous is another reason that he's compared to Babe Ruth, actually, is because he was sold in 1887 for what was then an unprecedented amount of $10,000, which amounts to $325,000 today, which doesn't seem like a lot, but back then players just weren't sold for that much. But he was just such a huge star that it's what happened, and it's part of the fame from then of King Kelly. That SGC3 of King Kelly sold for $7,200, so it's a nice start for this collection. To give you an idea of value now, an SGC 1.5 sold last year in 2022 for $16,000. So what would a 3 sell for now? $25,000, maybe $50,000. Probably not $50,000, but certainly well over that $16,000 that one went for in just a 1.5 last year. Charles Comiskey was also featured in the card. He was fielding without a glove. His card was graded an SGC 5. The rarest copy of a young mascot named Willie Breslin, dressed in a small Giants uniform, was also found in this collection. Now, Breslin was a mascot for the team, but especially for Buck Ewing, who was a very superstitious player. And every time I hear superstitious, I'm reminded of Michael Scott, who said, "I'm not superstitious, I'm a little stitious." But anyway, so Buck Ewing was very superstitious, so he had mascots, and his favorite, and the one that was the most famous at the time, was this little kid, Willie Breslin, and he would dress up in this tiny Giants uniform, and he was on some Old Judge cards, including one from this collection. As you can see, here with Buck Ewing. But most people don't realize that Willie Breslin was so popular and famous at that time that he was on his own Old Judge card. And Old Judge may not have even expected people to redeem coupons for a Willie Breslin mascot card, but at least 3 people did. 2 of them are in the SGC population as a normal Old Judge Willie Breslin card. But one of them from this collection was the Willie Breslin card, the mascot card, but it has a dog's head advertisement. It's the only one, nobody knew it existed, I think, before this collection was found. It's the only one on the SGC Pop Report today. So quite interesting. That one sold for $9,600. That's a SGC 4. The year before that, an SGC 7 without the dog's head ad sold for $8,400. So yeah, there is obviously quite a disparity between those prices because the dog's head is considered much more rare, even though there's only 2 without the dog's head. The one with Buck Ewing in an SGC 5.5 sold for $36,000. Obviously, Buck Ewing was a big draw at the time. Deacon White card in an SGC 5 sold for $16,000. So pretty awesome. I don't have results from all 15 of the cards. I couldn't find all of them, if they even sold all 15 of them. But yeah, I love these stories. I want to know from you, what is your oldest card? I want pictures and I want the story of your oldest card, and I will do a video. And yes, I still owe you one more video. I did a 2-parter a couple weeks ago, and I haven't done the second part yet. I'm gonna get that very soon. I've just been absolutely buried. So yeah, email me at thejunkwexhero@gmail.com. Your oldest card with pictures and a story behind the card. I'd love to do that video. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, because I do this kind of content all the time featuring collectors. Yeah, hope you guys have a great weekend. See you again later this weekend.